At this point, I think I need to start working on building my pitman arm. I'm going to build it out of this. This is about 4-inch drop pitman arm that I had laying around, so I'm going to cut it up. Probably cut the end off here, cut that end off, build something in between the two to attach them back together in the configuration that I need them, and should be able to weld that up and get it plenty strong for what we're doing here. I'm not too worried about it because that ram is going to take up most of the work for steering, so this would be just kind of guiding things along, but I still want it to be nice and beefy. So when I was mocking things up, I used this pitman arm, one I had laying around again, to kind of tell me how long the pitman arm I'm making needs to be so that the ram bottoms out on itself before the box hits its own stops. That way I don't have to worry about the ram trying to over travel the pitman arm and snapping off the sector shaft, because that ends in a long day. So what I came up with, this point right here, if that's where my tie rod end is, I think you can see the mark there, and my box end is right here, then that should give me the length I need, so I can just take the parts I cut off that other one, kind of line them up on here, line it up with that mark, and now I know what I need to put in between these. The only thing I don't know yet is the exact angle, but I can get something kind of mocked up in there, stick it in place and see what my angle needs to be, and then get something a little more permanent. Got a little bit more going on this pitman arm, so made my trusty cereal box template. I also ground these pieces down to kind of a point, and the piece in the middle I'll do the same thing. I'll wind up leaving a 1/16 inch gap between them so I get plenty of penetration in there. We'll get a full weld on that, so it should be plenty strong. So now I'm going to take this will come over here, and I just need to cut this piece of 1x2 flat bar into this shape, and I'll do the same thing, taper the ends of it to match the other pieces, and I should be able to get it tacked together and start seeing how it fits. And so I got my piece cut, so that's pretty much ready to go, but what I do need to do is machine it down a little bit. You see this is about 7/8 thick, this is about 1 inch, so I'll go ahead and throw this in the mill and machine about 1/8 of an inch off of that, and then I should be able to put the rest of the shape to it that I need. See, I just got to machine off a little bit of taper on each side of it, and then we'll start seeing how things fit up. Alright, so I've got this piece all milled and sanded to shape. You can see I've got my bevels going there, so I got plenty of room to get some good solid weld in. Kind of stuck some pieces under here to kind of mimic the amount of drop that I want. It should be pretty close to it, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get this tacked up, and we'll see how it fits. So with it tacked up, kind of doing a little trial fit here. You see, I'm still not quite as low as I need to be with the tie rod end, which this isn't the one I'm using. I'm just assuming that what I am going to use is similar to this. So I think we're going to try again. I think, I can try and bend this down, so I tacked it on the edges rather than up inside. So hopefully I might be able to bend it, but chances are the welds are going to break and I'll have to kind of start over a little bit, but shouldn't be a big deal. Just keep trying until I get it right. Well, since I don't have my tie rod ends yet to be able to get my drag link made and be able to figure out my Panhard bars, I'm going to move on to something else. So for right now, I've got these upper shock mounts, these from TMR. So I'm going to see about getting set up to get these installed. figure out where they got to go. So this is going to go on my shock hoop roughly like that. I got the old shock mounts and everything cut off of those. That's just pain in the butt cutting and grinding, but they're gone now. So now to make these work, I'm going to have to cut out a bit of this inner fender here so there's room, because this is actually, I think, sitting a little tall right now, but so it's going to have to rotate down and then room for the shock to come up through it. So get working on that. I think I'm just going to wind up probably hole saw out corners and then just cut it with a cutoff wheel. Should make it look pretty decent. All right, there it is all marked up. So I've got centers marked. I'm going to take a 2-inch hole saw, put those in there. It'll give me a nice rounded corner in that. Should come out looking pretty decent, I think. And here it is all cleaned up, ready to go. Went ahead and rounded off the corners here too. Got it all filed out and smooth so there's no edges there to catch anything. So we'll try and see how the shock fits in there. So I don't know if I've said yet, but this is what I'm going to be using for the shocks. These are 16-inch travel ORI. They're set up for a remote reservoir. So it should give me plenty of travel, plenty of adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead and get this up on the top mount here, and then we'll stick it in and see how it fits. All right, that looks pretty good in there. So with the frame height right now, I'm sitting about 3/4 of an inch above full bump, so that'll account for the 3/4 of an inch there. With this sitting on its bump stop up top, looks like we got plenty of room for the shock to be able to move around, be able to get the bolt in and out. So that's pretty much where that mount's going to live. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get that tacked in, and that'll be its new home. That's where we're at. Feeling pretty confident about this being its final location. So it got 4 tacks, so that shouldn't be going anywhere. It's just going to work. Now just to repeat the whole process on the other side. All right, so now in order to complete the shock mount, I need to fill in this gap between the end of this hoop and the new frame extension there. And because this is all part of the fender, I want that to be removable. So in order to do that, I'm using some of these tube couplers. These ones are actually from TMR. See, they're kind of nice. They've got a little keyed in section there, so even under tension, you're not relying on just these 2 little bolts to hold everything in place. You've actually got a pretty substantial amount of steel latched into itself. So we'll wind up with that right there, and then I'll do a piece of tube between this and the old piece of tube, wind up sleeving. I've got a piece of 1 1/4 that'll go inside there, so it'll be sleeved up and good and strong. The other nice feature on these too is they're actually designed to where you can just directly notch them and attach them onto a piece of tube. You don't have to weld on another little short piece just to make it sit like that. So it'd be pretty nice. So get this in there, figure out how long a piece of tube I need, get that cut, and we'll start getting this put together. Here I've got my piece of 1 1/2 cut, and I kind of like putting stuff together like this where I want it to stay straight. Just lay it in a piece of angle iron, and that way it makes sure that everything's all nice in line when you go to tack it up. And then I've also got this little piece of 1 1/4 that's going to wind up getting tacked in there until everything's in place. That'll just give me a nice backer for the weld, so I can get a good solid weld in there, make sure this thing's as strong as it can be. So here's everything kind of tacked in place. So you can see I've got a pretty good gap between those two with that 1.25 inch backer in there, so that'll give me plenty of room that I can really burn into that thing and basically make this as strong as it can be. So for right now, I'm going to pull it back out. I'm going to go ahead and weld up this joint on the bench where it's easy to get to, and then I'll stick this back in and get it tacked in place. And there it is, pretty much all burned in place. So I still haven't welded the backside. I'm going to wait until I pull the axle out. I can get to that a little bit more easily and get that welded up, but that's pretty much how that's going to live. So I just need to figure out a tube here. I got to bend up something that'll come down and fill in this gap here, but I've got to figure out my bumper going out the front first, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. Everything I need for the moment is pretty well in place. Alright, well, the parts for my drag link finally showed up, so this is really kind of what I've been waiting for. You can see these are an offset tie rod end, so instead of the threads coming out on center line, they're about 1 inch or so off. And I was needing that because with the way everything comes up at full compression, if they were straight, the drag link was going to land almost directly on top of where my hydraulic fittings are here. So with that, it moves it forward far enough that it clears all of that. And that was really only with it at full lock to the right is where I was having an issue with it. But with this, that'll eliminate that problem. It makes it so that everything clears, barely, but it clears. And so I've gone ahead and got my pitman arm bent to where I've got enough clearance here. I'm probably just going to run a flush Zerk fitting on there, so I should have plenty of room with all of that. So now I just need to get the other end in my steering arm and measure up for the tube to go between them, and I can get this thing put together, and then I'll know where it's going to be, and I can start figuring out how the Panhard bar is going to sit. Alright, so that's what it's going to look like. So I've got the box centered, so that pitman arm's pointing straight forward. I've got this knuckle pointing as straight forward as I can get it, and then just cut the piece of tube to fit in between. So I'll get that tacked up, and that will give me the idea of how that Panhard bar needs to sit, so I can figure out how my mounts are going to go for that. So yeah, one more thing off the list. Alright, so now onto this Panhard mount. So I'm on plan C or D or something like that now, trying to get this thing sorted out. So I've been having it come in like this because that's kind of how I thought I need it to be. But now that I'm looking at it, it needs to be more this way. So I'm going to go ahead and take this thing and start chopping it up and try and get it to fit in here, because I want the end on the link to be similar height to where my drag link is, so that all comes out running pretty parallel to each other. So I'll see what I got to do to cut this thing up and start getting it on there. Alright, so after half an hour or so of cutting, fitting, grinding, cutting some more, grinding some more, this is what we've come up with. I think it's going to work out pretty well. I mean, it's in the area it needs to be. You can see it's going to put the end of the bar about the same height as that tie rod end, so that's pretty much where I want it. It's pointed just a little bit ahead of the joint on the other end, which is what I need, because there's going to have to be a little bend in that to clear the upper link mount. So all in all, I think this is going to work out. Said it doesn't look normal, but then kind of nothing about this is normal. So I'm going to start working on getting figured out what I need for tubing in there, and kind of go from there. Since I'm going to have a bend in this Panhard bar, I've decided I'm going to use this bushing at the frame end instead of the heim. That way the bend will stay where it's supposed to be and won't be trying to rotate on the heim, and won't have to worry about things flopping around where they aren't supposed to be. So just took a piece of this 2-inch 250 wall tubing, just bored it out just a little bit, and made the width right so that this bushing will press in there, and then I'll just weld this right onto the piece of 1.5 250 that the Panhard bar is going to be made out of. So I'm thinking I'll do that first. I'll get the 1.5 tube notched and get it at least tacked onto here, and then I'll stick everything together, put it in there, and see where things are going to end up on the other end, where my bend's going to need to be, all that sort of stuff. So this is my notching setup I use most of the time. I've just got set up on the lathe. I made this clamp to go on where the tool post would normally be, and then in this case I've got a 2-inch roughing end mill in the chuck. So now I can set my angle by the compound slide. In this case I'm just doing a straight 90-degree notch, and then just feed into that end mill, and takes seconds, and I've got a nice clean notch. Because this is some pretty heavy wall tube, I went ahead and took this to the disc sander and put a nice bevel around the outside of it, and now that'll sit just like that. You can see it makes for, it'll focus. Anyway, makes for a nice clean fit up, and I've got plenty of room. I can get some decent weld in there. Get this thing tacked on here, and we'll start seeing how we fit from there. Alright, so I got that bushing tacked on, got it up in the bracket here, and it's snugged up so I know where it's going to be. So we come over here to the other end, you can see we're coming straight out of the frame side and running up forward of the axle end, so you can see I'm going to have to put just a little bit of a bend in it just to make it come around the upper link bracket and not crash into anything. So you get it marked where it needs to bend, and then we'll see how angry this is going to make my bender. Okay, that's pretty close to the bend I want. Actually a little surprised that this thing did it, but it did. Didn't blow up all over the place either, so that's a bonus. We'll throw it back in, see how it fits. So it's pretty close, but I need to give it just a little bit more bend. If I kind of pull it around, things start to line up, but I want it to have as much movement either way as it can, so I'm going to put just a little bit more bend in here, and it should be good. Alright, so we put a little bit more bend in it. You can see now it's landing right where I want it to. So now I can come over, cut this thing off right there, stick that bung in, get it tacked together, and that's everything on this. So I'm going to get that done, and I'm going to start running this thing up and down and twisting and everything, just make sure I don't have any binding anywhere. And if I don't, this thing's ready to come apart and start getting everything all final welded. It's pretty much done. Pretty happy about that. And there it is, tacked in place. So if you get down in front of it, you can kind of really see that it's matching the angle of the drag link pretty close. I mean, I don't think I can get it any closer. So that should minimize bump steer issues. I'm sure it's going to have a little bit, but this is not a high performance machine here. This is meant to do bad things and get beat on. So yeah, it'll be fine. So I'm going to wind up cutting that off because I'm not using that top hole, so I might as well just get rid of that. That'll give me a little more clearance to the strut when everything flexes up. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. So now it's just a matter of moving the suspension through all of its movement, making sure that nothing binds up. And if I don't find any issues, about time to take this thing apart, weld everything up, and get ready for final assembly. Here it is, full compression, actually a little bit beyond. I know it kind of looks like it's touching here, but there is gap. So then it's clearing up inside the bracket on that side, so that's all good. Everything is got clearance, so full compression's working. So now we'll see if I can stretch this thing out and see what we get full extension. And here it is at actually a little bit past full droop. So everything's working like it should. The only place I'm having an issue right here, I've just run out of angle on that tie rod end, but I can fix that. I think I'm going to do the same thing I did on the pitman arm. When I finish this thing out, I'll just cut this off, rotate it up, bevel everything out, weld it back together, and that should solve that problem. So altogether, I've got the full 16 inches of non-binding vertical travel. So I'm pretty happy with this. This is coming out really well, and I got no complaints so far. So yeah, now it's just a matter of getting everything I've got on here finished up, final welded. So get the steering arms finished. I'll have to get the double shear tubes welded in there. I'm going to do a little reinforcement on that as well. But yeah, this thing is a functional suspension now.